Welcome to RSAC Conference 2025. We're recording from the Cyber Risk TV studio at Marriott Marquis in San Francisco. Thank you to the sponsor of today's media partner program, Cyber SG. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and joining me for this interview is Taik Guan, CEO at PQC.com.
Thank you, Mike.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. And you have a subject kind of near and dear to my heart, encryption and HTTPS and all these things.
Nice.
But I think we should start off with, sure, HTTPS is out there, but quantum encryption, quantum attacks, why is this a concern?
Well, so if you understand cryptography, which is a good thing, and cryptography has been around for the last, 30, 40 years, protecting a lot of the data and the traffic that's been going through, and really what makes internet move as what it is right now. Unfortunately, when quantum computers become powerful enough, and this we're expecting it to be within the next 5 to 10 years, a lot of the public key cryptography that is used to protect and ensure the trust between communicating parties, where data is perhaps transmitted, between the bank to the consumer, or between just two enterprises, that information can no longer be secure because a quantum computer in 5 years' time is able to break that stuff. That means that someone is going to be able to see what we are already going to be transmitting. Isn't that scary?
Yeah, and then and you listed already, banking, there could be even just social media, even communications. So a lot of these things are personal to us, private to us, and they should stay that way. And part of the threat then, as you're describing, is that it's not that they're being broken now, it's that somebody could collect this data and then sit on it for several years. So that's sort of, tell us a little bit more about that particular threat model.
There's literally a name for it. It's called Harvest-Now-Decrypt-Later. Right, so this threat is really to describe how an attacker who would simply collect a lot of the encrypted data today, the HTTPS traffic data that you're saying, well, the attacker cannot look at it right now, but he knows that if he collects it today, stores it in the cloud or wherever he wants it to be.
Storage is cheap.
Yeah, storage is cheap, unfortunately, which really works to our disadvantage. And once that information is stored there, this attacker could, in the near future, say in 5 years' time, decrypt that stored data using a quantum computer in the future. So it seems like we're going, ahead of time, back in time. But I would say that what comes to it is a lot of the data that's being transmitted today potentially can be exposed in 5 years' time.
And speaking of going back and forth in time, let's go back in time a little bit to you mentioned 30 years ago we had TLS 1.0, a couple creaky implementations, Beast, right. Crime, Poodle, a lot of fun names for these, these problems, right? Yeah. The quantum decryption is a little bit, it's a little bit of a different threat. It's not a problem with the implementation, right? It's the design. Tell us a little bit about why this is a kind of a different nuance.
So this has to be, you have to then go into the whole study of public key cryptography, where there's essentially a key pair. There's a public key and a private key. And given these two pairs that work in coordination with each other, a public key is what you simply publish and let everyone else know, while the private key is kept secret to yourself.
It's in the name.
In the name, right? And if you're going to send me information, you encrypt the data with the public key, and with my public key, and when you transmit to me, only I can decrypt it. What happens, and the specific vulnerability that these public key cryptographic algorithms like RSA and ECC have, is given a quantum computer, the attacker could take the public key and literally calculate the private key. Now that's scary, because now that assumption that only me and I know the private key and that secret is broken. That attacker can also have the private key, and therefore that attacker can decrypt whatever that was sent, which is bad. And that's really the whole quantum threat that we want to fix, and that's what PQC is really working on.
Yeah, and the premise was those factoring was supposed to be hard. It becomes less hard. Tell us how this attack works, or tell us what the post-quantum part is now.
The difficulty didn't change. It's just that quantum computers, because of its crazy speed-ups and the ability to process a lot more data, is able to find the underlying cyclic models within, say, RSA, where you're looking at how to factorize, say, two prime numbers put together into a modulus, right? So it's able to find the cycles there in a much faster time compared to a regular computer. So if we have all the cloud systems of the world, you take a RSA 2048 bit key, it's still going to take several gazillion years in order to do that. But with a quantum computer, that several gazillion years is shrunk to perhaps a couple of minutes, couple of hours, and that's the scary part.
And that's the scary part. So then, what does what does PQC do about this? It's not just we haven't gone to 2048 to 4096, right? You're doing something different.
That's not going to change too much, right? Just moving that key size is just going to, I'll say, kick the can down the road a little, delay the inevitable, but not going to fix the problem. Post-quantum cryptography, in that sense, then it's about really using a different branch of math. We're not going to use integer factorization as the underlying problem. It's typically based on, say, lattice-based cryptography or hash-based cryptography, which has a lot more underlying mathematical constructs that can defend against these kinds of these kind of searches that are based on cyclic models that you see. So based on, say, lattice-based cryptography, a quantum computer will not be able to find the private key given the public key. And that's really what we're trying to do from a post-quantum cryptography standpoint. And now it's a matter of taking what systems that are using, say, RSA, and now implementing PQC on top of that.
And it's a lot of the algorithms are still relatively new in terms of standardization or formalization, right? Because was it Kyber is only 2 years old, I think, something like that.
Well, lattice-based cryptography is 20 over years old, but the standard is, say, it was only standardized in August of 24. Well, it's less than a year old. So yes, it's scary because cryptography typically it's a very difficult branch of math and requires a lot of time, a lot of brains to really work through it. We expect that over the next couple of years, there will still be a lot of work done to make sure that the standard that was published is in fact a good standard. I'm sure that there are many researchers out there who would try to make a name for themselves and try to do something. But I would say that process of standardization went through a very rigorous, I would say, 8 years of stuff. They started in 2016. So to be fair, it's not really a 6-month or 7-month-old algorithm. It's probably an 8.5-year-old algorithm.
Yeah, and I think one of those aspects, though, speaking of the time, I mentioned TLS 1.0. Yep. It has taken much more than a few months, much more than 8 years to get to TLS 1.2, 1.3, website adopters. And to your point too, a website operator doesn't need to know the deep math and the background of the lattice, et cetera. But they do need to deploy something easily. They want to protect themselves. So how do we get to the point where TLS 1.3 or PQ, post-quantum encryption is ubiquitous? It's just protecting people by default.
Well, it's already started. So in fact, if you look out there, there are probably a good 20% of websites out there that have started that post-quantum journey.
Okay. Double digits is optimistic.
Yes,
I like that.
Well, it is. Well, to a certain degree, right? I mean, rolling out the challenge of rolling out post-quantum cryptography is not the cryptography itself. That's the easy part. It's about maintaining the backwards compatibility. It's maintaining the operational compatibility and seamless operations such that the end user uses it like as per normal, right? You didn't realize that you were actually using a more advanced branch of cryptography, but it's there. Now that's the hard part. And how do you make sure that this really gets into the heart of the product? And that's really what we believe is key to rolling out a good post-quantum migration project.
So what does that look like then for that rollout? Is this something that, can I easily, it's not like I'm swapping a certificate, but I'm saying that a little bit of just to demonstrate naivety from a web.
No, you're not. I mean,
So what does it take?
I'm very sure that there are projects out there that you really just need to swap a certificate. What we are seeing is, beyond just a single project, because post-quantum cryptography really affects everything, right? From this whole AV systems that we're talking to the wireless connections. Literally everything here has some form of cryptography built in to ensure the security. Now, trying to go in there and try to fix it on one certificate at a time, that's not going to work. We believe in a much more broad-based approach where we look at the supply chain itself, right? So in order to get to where we are, there are already many layers that have come into play, right? The vendors that have come in for the microchips and the systems and the wireless routers and stuff. If we start to work at that level and make sure that these guys already start to become post-quantum in their implementations, in their versions, that rollout starts to become a bit more ubiquitous and a lot more straightforward, down to then finally when a bank decides to go post-quantum, oh, most of my systems are already there, and that's a great part of what we believe is the way to go in a post-quantum migration.
That is, and part of this too, I think part of your approach too is the end-to-end aspect as well, which is also just, well, tell us why end-to-end is such a key part of that.
So end-to-end, end-to-end as in the end-to-end encryption or protection of data is something that has come across as a very important part of not just about post-quantum cryptography, but really about zero trust in general. Right, so a lot of the systems right now are focused on, let's do a point-to-point thing. If you send something to me and that communication to me is secure, it seems to be okay. But if I transfer it over to, say, someone else, what happens between that transfer is actually not protected. There is actually the exposure there, and with this whole with so much more complexities into this whole communication. And bear in mind, it's not just two of us, right? It's a whole mesh of stuff. What we want, at least the promise that we want to, say, an organization which is very concerned about security, say a public sector, they want to make sure that that information that leaves the user that they are communicating to the organization is never tampered with, never seen, and never modified along the way, even with intermediate systems, be it your cloud, be it your CDN providers, be it your routers. None of them could actually modify, see, or really change any of that communication. So this end-to-end encryption is something that we think will start to be a lot more important because when quantum cybersecurity comes and post-quantum requirements start to come in, the CISO will be so overwhelmed with so much stuff. Taking away some of these headaches would be amazing for him.
Absolutely, because there's no harvesting. We'll want to get rid of that. Yep. But you were pointing out too that idea of just the integrity of the data. Yep. The end-to-end helps to say, oh, someone is eavesdropping or somebody has messed or interfered with this communication.
Precisely.
So in that, what if we skipped ahead even another 20 years? Let's say we now have our post-quantum algorithms. Yep. Are we still going to have to fix things?
Definitely.
What are we going to have to work on?
We were just talking about DES earlier on. Do you know that there is still DES out there in the wide open field? There are systems out there that are stuck with legacy cryptography that cannot be changed for various reasons. It could be because of the infrastructure, it could be because of cost or different things. But these are systems that therefore require additional layers of mitigation to make sure that they continue to run with the same level of trust that we want, but unfortunately using, say, an older, less secure form of protection itself. I mean, I take for example even blockchains. How are you going to even upgrade that the Bitcoin and Ethereum, which is just so ubiquitous and everywhere? Whoa, my God, that's a crazy kind of upgrade process that we probably have to spend a lot more time on it.
Yeah, CISOs are going to be busy, I think, is what you're saying.
Well, it's not just the CISOs, right? Everyone is going to be busy. Yeah. It's going to be like Y2K all over again. But I guess that's where the opportunity lies, and that's where PQC really wants to be part of the game.
That makes a lot of sense. And is there any final, speaking of CISOs, is there final advice or something they would really just want them to be thinking about when they hear post-quantum or all these aspects?
Well, I think the most important thing is that you really cannot wait to start the post-quantum journey. And the post-quantum journey doesn't start by having to rip and replace what you have. You could start small. You could start with awareness programs. You could start with a pilot where you want your internal team, you want your existing vendors, your direct vendors, to be aware of what needs to be done in order to even do a post-quantum migration project. And bear in mind, it's not just a technical thing. How do you even budget for a post-quantum project? Have you done it before? And if you have run a pilot, now that's going to help you when you really want to budget for a real one. So these are the things that really make a CISO be a lot more confident when the real big migration happens. And therefore, starting today, in fact, starting yesterday, would have been a good thing for them.
Starting yesterday. Well, this has been a great conversation about private data, but very publicly so. So I want to say thank you very much for this. I want to thank everyone else for joining us. To find out more about pqc.com, please visit securityweekly.com/PQCEE RSAC. For all RSAC 2025 coverage by Cyber Risk Alliance, including the other 6 interviews from our media partner program with Cyber SG, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.